Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to our district-wide staff meeting this afternoon. We are really happy that you chose to join us for the next hour. I am Jeremy Grandskinner, the Chief Human Capital Officer, and today I am your co-host along with Tina Hyde-Hubbard, who is our Chief Communications, Engagement, and Enrollment Officer. Thank you all very much for joining and participating today. We really are glad that you are here. In our cases, we're here COVID hair and all, although I did put on a tie today to be with you. I want to talk a little bit more about what you should expect over the next hour. First, why are we here? This is a first of its kind event, not just during this current period of remote teaching and learning and work, but period. This is the first time that we've had an opportunity to invite every staff member from city schools together in this way. Our interests this afternoon are creating a space for some shared celebration, some shared reflection, to hear directly from the CEO, Dr. Santelices, and to use some of this time for some Q&A to answer questions that we know are top of mind for a lot of staff members right now. To that point about questions and answers, we received a lot of questions beforehand, and those are the questions that we are going to have an opportunity to answer today. If you did not get a chance beforehand to submit a question, please also feel free to enter your questions in the chat anytime during this hour together today, and we will follow up to answer those questions after today. With that, I want to once again thank you not just for joining today, but also for the work that you are doing as members of our team. We appreciate everything that you are doing, in many cases from home and in some cases on site, and also how you are holding the needs of our students and our families and our buildings and of other staff at the center of what you're doing day in and day out right now. And with that, I do want to give a special shout out to those team members who, based on their role or based on their choice to volunteer, are actually still going in to our sites, including our special food distribution sites during this time. And we have a video that we want to share with you today that expresses our special gratitude for those staff members who are working on site these days. Welcome back. I hope you appreciated an opportunity to see a short video just representing the great work that is happening on site, and thank you to everyone who is continuing that work for our students and our families and our communities. I have the pleasure now of moving us along to hear directly from our CEO. I will be back at the end, and before that you will hear from other members of our cabinet through some Q&A. So let me say it is really a great time to be working with Dr. Santelices leading our district, because the things that show up day in and day out, a commitment to effective teaching and learning, a commitment to equity, a focus on relationships, show up even more now in this time and are more important now than ever. And I'm therefore really excited that everyone will get a chance to hear directly today from our leader. Here she is, Dr. Santelices.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeremy. And it is, oh, there we go. Great. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for that introduction. And I couldn't think of a better way to get started than with a little Anita Baker. That's a plus. And the wonderful video that our team put together, just commemorating all of the great work that has been occurring the last, oh my goodness, it feels like year, but it's only been a couple of weeks. One of the silver linings in this very challenging period of time in Baltimore City is that in our push and need to use technology more, I think this is the first district-wide staff meeting that we've been able to hold, because we actually can have much greater numbers of people tune in. So I want to thank you, staff, who have been able to and who have checked in. Just want to spend some time with you all today, really just kind of going through where we are, where we've been, and a little bit about where we're going to the extent that we know. I think also starting with that video is something that I don't think we can emphasize enough. And in addition to being able to say thank you for all of you and everything that you are doing to help keep the district serving families and young people, is also just the thank you for where we really are in, I think, a very strong position to tackle what is coming next. And so I want to take just a little time right now to go through a little bit of where we've been. And so we'll get started with that now. Dr. Wu, I think, is working on my slides. Thank you very much. So what you see here, just briefly, is a little bit of retrospective of that time of where we have been since March 12th. And to think that it is only just about 8 weeks ago now that we first got the announcement of school closure, that March 12th. And then on March 16th, we opened our emergency meal sites. Academic packets were being distributed. Staff, many of you were developing long-term plans for remote learning and technology. And even during spring break, we had large numbers of central staff in particular, as well as some out in the field who were working. March 30th, right after we finished spring break, you'll see here, we reopened meal sites and really began launching distance learning, or preparing for the launch of distance learning on April 6th. Our IT team, which really was a cross-functional, cross-departmental team, got things going on April 5th with Chromebook distribution. And really that has been continuing since. We started with our seniors, and many folks made sure that that was happening both at the central as well as at local school sites. So thank you for both the urgency and thoughtfulness of connecting as many of our students as we could as possible. And then really beginning educational recovery. And I want everyone to know that even with the immediacy of the moment. We knew that educational recovery would need to begin taking place, and we are now, since May 6th, when Dr. Karen Salmon announced the formal, I don't want to say school closure, because we have a number of families who were thinking and were trying to reaffirm that distance learning is continued, but we learned on May 6th that the physical buildings in school would remain closed for the end of the year. And so while we began educational recovery planning before that, we will now begin to accelerate that, and you'll get a chance to see some of how we're framing that work, how we're looking at it, and then also some of the ways that you all will get involved, and frankly, be able to give us feedback of some of our considerations. So with regards to distance learning and giving you an overview around that, I think it is nothing short of incredible that a district that had a ratio of 1 device for every 4 students on March 12th now has been able to engage through distance learning, and that is a combination of folks putting a number of different things together, from phone calls to parents tuning in on cell phones to actually getting devices. We have been able to engage approximately 85% of our students through distance learning, through a combination of paper packets and in some cases social media, and more recently through our distance learning platforms. We've been able to really reach a large percentage, and let me tell you, that percentage increased incrementally each week across the district. And now for that remaining 15%, we are really doubling down and soliciting the assistance from some of our partners. Some of our central teams will be supporting school teams as we really dig in to finding that remaining 15%. I think one great example of why this is important really came through just, I believe, this week. A great example of this is the team under the leadership of Principal Miller at Lockerman Bundy Elementary School, who sent out a shout out that they had finally connected with their last student. They had used different techniques that many of you have used of distance visiting, phone calling, connecting through other students. And then I think finally earlier this week, got a phone call from the parent to the teacher of the last student. And the piece that's so powerful about that story, as indicative of the work that we are doing as a district, that I really want to emphasize, is the importance of for our families of knowing that their children, and for the students themselves, of knowing that they are seen and that they are heard, and that no student during this time is expendable. There is no young person, there is no family that we can just put to the side and say, well, it's okay that we got everybody but them. Every sheep in the herd matters. Every young person that's part of the community matters. And I think the fact that staff have stepped up and really had that framework of making sure that our young people are seen and they're valued and they know that they are important and matter is part of the reason why we are at this 85%, and that I know we will very quickly close the gap on that 15%. So kudos on the distance learning. Next. And this is a great quote. This was from one of our teachers who is a real valuable part of, frankly, my reflection over the last few weeks, our CEO Teacher Advisory Council. And this quote really does also speak to the work and the heavy lift that our teachers are doing, the creativity, the innovation that they have used to connect to scholars, just whether it's through Instagram posts, whether it's through, I spoke with one principal who said she was watching a reality show. One of her students called her, and it was during that conversation that she found one or two other students. And so this piece about the creativity within Baltimore City, within our teachers, finding new ways to teach, for me, just exemplifies, one, the commitment to learning, but also the commitment to the knowledge that we all have that no learning exists where there is not relationship. So shout out to everyone who has really helped us reach that target. Next. And then I love this quote from a student at Benjamin Franklin. And again, it just exemplifies that the small pieces, the small things, asking how folks' families are doing. And I've also heard this from our adult staff, but I think it's most powerful when we see from our young people that seemingly small gestures actually signal to them, again, that they are seen, they are heard, and they are known. And that within a crisis, within a swirl, is even more important than it is within the daily work that we do. And I think this quote from one of our students is saying to us and saying to you all that we have a lot of unseen folks who are leading from their seats and making sure that every phone call matters. So again, thank you for that. The other major place that we have just seen just an amazing lift from teams of folks who are helping to distribute food, to our amazing food and nutrition team, many of them who, quite frankly, have been working tirelessly around this. I want to give a shout out as one example for our amazing food service workers. We've been fortunate that we've had some wonderful recognition in our national and local press. I want to give a shout out to one of the food sites I had a chance to visit, and that is the regional cafeteria manager, Tawanda Carter, at Alexander Hamilton, that really exemplifies what it means to be doing the work that you know young people and families need without, frankly, regard to what it means for the extra hours and time that you're putting in. You'll see here that through these efforts, we've served over 305,000 meals through our 18 meal sites, and I believe this is as of, frankly, this week. So this distribution is ongoing. We've distributed over 6,000 grocery boxes, and we have provided an additional 76,000 plus meals through our partnership with the World Central Kitchen. I want to thank all of the team that actually helped bring that partnership to fruition. We were on the ground immediately, as soon as we could be, with World Central Kitchen. And just want to say that in a lot of the conversations I had with our food and nutrition staff, volunteers throughout the community, our National Guard, what was clear to me was people were there because, like many of us, they saw the need of their community and they stepped up and are still stepping up and responding. I remember asking a food and nutrition team at one of our schools, you know, look, we're trying to rotate you out so that we can give you a rest and get some folks who've been home a little bit longer out in the field. And I remember that team, and they looked at me almost offended because in their minds, and I'll never forget, you know, the statement was, Dr. S., these are our babies. This is our community, and this is the work we're doing for them. And so I want to thank all the folks that have been out. We also have folks, quite frankly, who have been managing food sites outside of what their regular job duties are. And again, they've been doing it. They knew that it was a need. They were on the front lines of interacting with the public at a time that the directive was that most people were supposed to be home. And we have many examples. I just want to shout out Holly Gonzalez, as a wonderful example of what it means to say, look, this may not be what I normally do, but I'm leading because I see the need, and that's what leading from your seat looks like. So thank you, and thank you to all the principals, all the community partners who have been stepping up to frankly meet the very basic everyday need that many of our families have in having stable food. So shout out there. And this is not surprising. For those of you who didn't get to see Ms. Bailey, who was profiled rightly so in the New York Times article that our very own Erica Green wrote. She profiled Ms. Bailey, and I think her quote here from her work at Sinclair Lane Elementary School really does sum up this spirit that I was referencing earlier. So thank you again to our food and nutrition team, our volunteers, our central family community engagement staff, principals, everyone else who really have stepped up. So that's where we are with our food needs. Next slide. One of the things I referenced earlier was the fact that we had on March 12th, a 1-to-4 device to student ratio within the district. And we immediately sprung into action. The IT team, Sarah Heaton, who got pulled off of her work to help support this effort. And we have now distributed over 11,000 devices to students. And we are currently working on internet access and a longer term technology planning. So we are in the midst of doing that now. Shout out to those who helped advocate for Mayor Young and the City Council. The additional $3 million that we've received is going to the purchase of devices as well as internet access. So I will say to everyone, continue to advocate for internet access. This is a national issue, it's a state issue, it's a city issue, and because of all of that, it is a Baltimore City public school issue. So shout out to all of the teams that have worked on device distribution. The IT team this week has been, shout out to them for actually going and doing deliveries to families who just, for a variety of reasons, could not and would not be able to make it out to sites. They are actually delivering those devices individually. So again, shout out where we're going on where we are now with device distribution. But as you will see, based on where we're going, this will only need to be ramped up in the coming months and weeks. Thank you. So one of the things that I love about this quote is I think it points to the fact that laptops, technology access in this time period are a way for students to connect and is absolutely a way for parents and families to know that their children matter. And it is also, I think, within this frame, something that signals to families that we believe that their children deserve what other children deserve. And that if other children have access to the internet, that Baltimore City Public Schools children are no different. And so again, know that even these small moves that many of you have done, the folks who went in on weekends in buildings to make sure that we had devices to distribute, really it is part of how we signal in word, action, and deed that we see you and we care about you. Next. So I just want to, reiterate our thank you by reminding us all to really be encouraged, because one of the things that has been encouraging to me during this time is that our city and our families see us. They see what we are doing. They see our responsiveness. They see everything that is occurring. So whether you are the one to pick up the one phone call and actually get someone an answer, all the way to delivering a meal or making sure a family has Pampers, or frankly, calling a student who is perplexed by an assignment and whose parents, could be even the CEO, are somewhat frazzled by the question. The fact that you call and help walk them through their child's learning and reassure them. They see us, and this thank you, I think, from this city school's parent exemplifies that. Next slide. So I think where we are now in terms of our positioning for moving forward is a strong one. It's not perfect, but it's not perfect for anyone, frankly, across the country or across the world. As I talk to colleagues in other countries that are opening up schools, have already opened up schools, we are part of a larger, frankly, world as well as national community of schools and educators that are engaging in what is being called now education recovery planning. So what you see here are the four major components of our planning here in city schools right now. Four major categories that we're going deeply on. First, maintaining the health and safety for all. And by all, I mean all staff as well as all students. And so we are working. I had a phone call with leadership at the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health just this morning. We have been checking in with Dr. DeRaza, although she is swamped right now, as I'm sure all of you can imagine. But we are really looking through what do we know now about COVID-19 and what are the best ways to support the health and safety for all of our staff and students. We're looking through that. That is a major concern. And frankly, area of focus for us. I think the other, to no one's surprise, is this acceleration of student learning and thriving. I didn't need to say it in an op-ed for everybody here to know, but it was a way of reinforcing to the community and clarifying any misconception. We are not ceding any learning time for young people. Yes, there are challenges, and yes, we will have to adapt. And I have been directing large amounts of grace during this period because we know people are going through. However, and we are also still committed to accelerating student learning and thriving during this period. And that is going to continue to be a focus for us. Third area is supporting all of our stakeholders and really adapting to what are new realities. You know, in talking to, principals who've had trees fall through their roof, or, staff members in every corner of the organization, many of whom have not only lost one or two family members in this, but many family members and are dealing with personal loss or their own medical health. So we are committed to supporting all stakeholders, getting feedback on how we best do that. Another shout out really is to our social emotional learning team. Katia has been doing a fabulous job in leading SEL sessions for principals. And just knowing that, frankly, all of us right now are managing our own anxiety and our own questions about what the future holds. And so we're committed to supporting our stakeholders as best we can within this new stage of recovery planning. And then the fourth major area is ensuring strong operational support functions. So facilities, transportation, IT, finance, legal, all of those departments working together, making sure that we continue what I think has been very strong operational functions through this crisis. Just want to give a shout out as an example of this to Sharika Bolden in operations, who has been tireless in making sure we get PPE, the personal protective equipment, to our frontline workers that we prioritized here in the district very early, making sure that folks got that. And I think Sharika exemplifies the work of a lot of people who have gone the extra mile in thinking through how do we make sure that the operational support functions are actually making people's work easier, but also making the educational and caring experience stronger. So that recovery planning, those four major areas are really our focus areas. We will be organizing. We have some support coming from Accenture that will help support the depth of our planning. and we will be reaching out. There's also, some key stakeholder groups of folks that we'll be reaching out to and are reaching out to assist in that. Next. I think one of the things that's important for us all to think through is the phases of recovery planning. And so part of what is true is that in this time, and I'm probably not telling most of you anything you don't already know, this time has really tested and pressed our ability as individuals, as teams, and as an entire district to really respond to the fluid, ever-changing nature of the situation. And so our planning work in this area really requires strategies that align with the three phases. You'll see here we've referenced the Maryland Together plan that the State Department of Education put out last week under Dr. Salmon's leadership. While the plan doesn't give kind of specific guidelines or directives, it does give suggestions, and I would recommend, as I've recommended even to parents, that we all familiarize ourselves with some of the key components of the document. I think one of the strengths is that it really does help us all make a shift from thinking of returning in September in a business as usual kind of frame, and what are all of the kinds of considerations we are going to need to take into account, given that social distancing is still, and again, on the call I just had this morning with Hopkins School of Public Health, nothing has changed in this, that social distancing is still the best way. That 6 feet distance is still the best way to address what we are finding in this virus, and the ability to thin out large kind of congregants of people. Those are still the two biggest levers to really address the challenges that this virus has been presenting us. So what you'll see here is phase one really is full remote learning. School closure, it's our current situation where there are no schools in operation, 100% virtual, no in-person learning is occurring in a physical way. Phase two is really a hybrid model. And so some of the scenarios we're running that would pertain to phase two, really in this medium recovery phase, and I'm watching my time because I'm going to give time for questions. This is where we really are getting a combination of in-person and virtual learning. So a combination of both. This is where that social distancing that I just referenced is going to be key. And then the third, which would be new normal, and that is kind of majority in person with some virtual components and options. The virtual learning is frankly with us for the foreseeable future, but I think what these phases at least begin to give you a sense of, I hope, is the fact that we're going to have to be able to respond, frankly, through fluid movement in each of these phases. So Germany, for an example, released back to school, and now they are seeing a surge, and so they may need to adjust and move from one phase back to the other. But generally speaking, this is the way we are thinking through our scenario planning. You'll see some of the key questions for phase 2 and 3 that really will guide and become our focus as we plan for phases 2 and 3. One thing I just want to highlight quickly is that we will be doing virtual family listening tours, our family and community engagement partners and team, as well as the Office of Assessment and Accountability under both Chief Hike Hubbard as well as Chief Jones, Teresa Jones, will be leading these efforts. So we will be really getting feedback from families. And we really want to foster, again, the shared ownership. We want to continue to interview families to make sure that we actually know how our families are doing, to keep that relationship, to keep that spirit of letting people know that we see them, we know them, and we are responding to where they are now. And then we'll also be sending out text messages to families so that we can really get real-time input and really ramping up our ability to do that in multiple languages. So please listen out for this. Keep this in mind as we move forward with that, I think, very important part of our pulse check. And then finally, I just want to end quickly because I want to turn it over for questions. But I want to end with this idea that I believe where we have been the strongest, and again, this is not to say that we won't have places that we have to build on, that we have to rectify, that we have to correct. But I do believe that the momentum we have, the overwhelmingly positive feedback from families and from community is really because we have large numbers of the city schools team who really are looking at the path and the process. That a lot of the people that I referenced today and teams that I referenced today are people that are not going out and saying, ooh, how can I make a big splash? And ooh, how can I make sure that I'm on the cutting edge of this or this? Actually, all of the people that I named today are focused on the path of connecting with young people, connecting with families, and delivering using relationships. And people who have attended to relationships and keeping the singular goal in mind. So if I have to leave you with anything, let's continue the momentum of focusing on the small and consistent steps, because the large gains are coming from those small and consistent steps. There is no step that you have taken to reach out to one family. That does not matter. There is no one response to a principal who needs something around technology or around their budget. That does not matter. Everything matters. And the work that we are doing together, again, is sending a message throughout the city that we in city schools are committed to our families, our young people, and our team. And thank you again. And I'm now going to turn it back over to Jeremy so that we can, and whether it's Jeremy or Tina, I don't know which, so that we can begin answering questions and you will not have to listen to me necessarily anymore. But again, just a large thank you. We can do this. We have done tremendous work so far, and we will continue to do this. Thank you. Tina.
Thank you, Dr. Sanchez. This is our first time we're actually doing an all-staff virtual meeting. I want to take a moment to introduce the cabinet membership so you understand who's on the leadership for city schools. So I'm going to go through them quickly and we'll get to questions very shortly. So you've already heard from Chief Grant Skinner, Chief of Human Capital. We have Dr. Lynette Washington, who is our Chief of Operations. We have John Davis, who is Chief of Schools. We have Teresa Jones, who is Chief of Achievement and Accountability. Allison Perkins Cohen, who is Chief of Staff. Josh Sivens, our Chief Legal Officer. Dr. Jenny Wu is Director of Executive Strategy and Operations. Dr. Tracy Durant, Executive Director of Equity. Sashi Badula is the Chief of ITD. Angela Alvarez, Executive Director of New Initiatives. And Marianne Cox is our current interim Chief Financial Officer. We were unable, unfortunately, to answer live questions given the number of participants for this meeting. So what we've done is ask folks to send in questions ahead of time that we are now going to attempt to answer many of them. If we don't get to your question, please know that we have taken the entire list of questions and we are elevating it to the categories that I just outlined so we can begin to think about the concerns that were elevated from staff. So I'm going to start with Dr. S, since she was first. There's been lots of questions, Dr. Santelises, about confirming the last day of school, both teachers and students. If you can clarify, I know you mentioned this at the board meeting last night, if you can clarify that for the group, that'd be really helpful.
Sure, Tina, I'm happy to do that. So where we are with the closing of school is that currently, as of yesterday, the last day of school for students and families was June 22nd, and the last day for faculty was June 23rd. Where we are as of last night, the Board of Commissioners approved an adjustment to the calendar and an application to the state board for a waiver that would allow us to make for families and students the last day of school as June 15th. We will work with BTU to discuss possible scenarios in terms of future use of the remaining days between the 15th and the 23rd for staff. As of right now, again, if the waiver were approved, it would allow us the ability to have that exchange. But when that waiver is approved, it would mean the last day for students and families would be June 15th. And we should hear about that shortly within a week or so. Does that answer the question, Tina?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask now Chief John Davis a question. You know, we heard Dr. Santelises talk about the recovery planning as Chief of Schools and Academics. Can you give us an idea of how the path for recovery planning, the teams you are creating, and maybe focus areas you'd like to talk about for a moment? And I want to also add that we have about 13 minutes left for the meeting, so I will be condensing a few of the questions down just to make sure we get things in during the time period. Thanks, Chief.
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. To build on what Dr. Santelises talked about with those 3 different scenarios, we are putting together grade band teams. Grade bands being pre-K and K, 1st and 2nd, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. And these teams are going to work to figure out what is the best schedule, what is the best use of time, both in the virtual space, in the hybrid space, and whenever we end up coming back into our normal school situation. Those teams will have principals, they'll have teachers on it, they'll have central-based leaders, and in the end, we've got to wrestle through this over the next month or so to figure out what the end of August, beginning of September is going to look like. At the same time, we're going to have content-based teams as well, again, made up of central office leaders with teachers and principals, school-based staff, such that what does science look like? What does working with our English language learners look like? What are all the different content-based adjustments that we have to make? And then eventually we're going to have to bring that together, right? We've got to be very adaptive in this space. We've got to be very nimble. And like Dr. Santelises said, we might start in one area and then go to another. But those teams have been put together, and over the next month, the next 6 weeks, we're going to be flushing all that out. We're going to figure that out and be ready by, hopefully, what my goal is to be able to give the school-based staff an idea of what the end of August and the beginning of September is going to look like by the time they leave. And then surely by the end of June, we've got to be pretty tight about this. As you all know, it's a very changing situation. I feel like every 6 hours something changes, so we will adapt accordingly. But quite honestly, it is really those 2 tracks. It's a content area track, and it's also a time track, and that will look differently for our younger kids in pre-K and kindergarten versus what maybe 9 through 12 will look like. But we're going to put a lot of effort into that over the next 4 to 6 weeks, and we're going to end up figuring that out. Another kind of set of questions that we've gotten is really around summer school. And I'll probably break this down into 3 components. One is we've had a lot of partners that we've used in the past, say Young Audience, for instance, and we'll use those partners in the virtual space as much as we possibly can. Those are things that families are already accustomed to, and we'll do that. The second area is we're going to figure out if families want to log on and have their children work on different types of units or different types of learning opportunities. What does that look like, right? We want to make sure we're providing something so that over the summer it's as strong as possible, and it'll be a voluntary situation. So we're trying to work out that as well as kind of a second track. And then the third track, we will still have high school credit recovery. So the high schoolers virtually will be able to make up credits that they need. So the summer space will look like that. I'll throw out one other set of questions, unless Tina, you have more, and that was around early literacy. There were a bunch of questions around how we are thinking about early literacy. And at the same time, I was prompted to make sure that our teachers in those early grade levels know that we have Foundations at Home resources. And I'm going to make sure that we all know about that. Probably a little bit less than half of our teachers know about these resources, and we've got to get that word out because the Foundations at Home resource has been really strong. Teachers have appreciated that. Families have appreciated that as well.
Thank you, Chief Davis. A couple of the questions for you quickly. I thought it was a very interesting one. How do we find the right balance between maintaining high expectations for our students while also being understanding of the challenges that our scholars face in their families right now?
Yeah, that is, I feel like, along with the work-life balance that as adults we have to have in this space, I think that is completely the challenge right now. I do want to say that I've appreciated, first of all, how teachers and school-based staff have made those connections. Dr. St. Elisa's talked about the 85% rate and how we're going after the last 15%, but that started from day one, frankly, where teachers were throwing everything in to make those connections. But it is that second step of if we are teaching, we've got to have some content involved in that. And we've got to make sure that we are doing everything we can in this space. I think one of the more heartwarming parts of this is how teachers have worked through this to make sure that they can give any type of content aligned with our curriculum already. Today I was in Highlandtown 215 and I saw really strong co-teaching, and I've also heard so much about how the SEL has flourished in this time. I think we're actually learning a lot during this time. I think as a school system and a learning organization, we've been a model of that, quite frankly, and we will do that continually so that we have those high standards. It is a challenge, but we are ripe to overcome that.
And last question for you, Chief Davis. Lots of folks want to know, when will teachers and students be allowed back into school to pick up their things and the classrooms and lockers since we're closed right now?
Yeah, we know we've got to do that before the end of the year, right? We've got to allow people to come in. I want to be clear, though, that everything we do is around the health and safety of our folks, right? No matter if it's our families we're dealing with or our staff members, we've got to do it right. And so if we do end up allowing that to come in, and we'll figure out the time, I shouldn't say if, when we do this, we'll do this in a structured way so that people are safe. That's really been the mantra since day one, and that will happen, I would absolutely say, before the end of the year.
Great, thank you. Chief Badula, I have a question for you. Several staff have asked, if we're continuing to do virtual learning, we're starting off virtually in the fall potentially. How are teachers being equipped with computers or support their online platform or learning? And can you speak to that for us for a moment?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Tina, for the question. I think one of the key, I would say, priority during this pandemic was to make sure our students are engaging in the distance learning and the learning continues. So we made sure providing devices to our student is a priority. So as part of that, as Dr. S said, we have distributed over 11,000 devices as of last Friday. So we will be starting with a phase 2 distribution for these students. We know we still have students we need to get to next Monday. Next week, we're going to start with that process. But what we also done is we have just had a cross-functional team. A subcommittee is actually getting together right now to devise a plan how we can address the need for our teachers who need the devices. So probably in coming weeks, we will definitely share that plan with the larger group.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Grant Skinner, we have a question. I'm going to read it verbatim. It's a great question. Based on the current environment of COVID-19, how does this affect the ability to attract and retain talent across departments? Also, finding new staff and team members from both inside and outside of the district. You can talk about that for a moment.
Sure, thanks. It's a great question. I will say our team has been adjusting its practices to do a lot of things virtually that we have historically relied on a lot of in-person interaction for. Things like on-campus events for finding new teachers and other new staff members for our district have moved to virtual events. We are this week and next week offering opportunities that are virtual for internal staff to explore other opportunities in different schools or locations, which typically we are also doing in person. I think we will see what the impact is on our ability to attract more external people. I think that our hope is that this may give a lot of folks out there who hadn't taken a prior look at city schools, lead them to take a second look at city schools as we continue to offer great opportunities even when some other organizations are unable to do so right now. The other side of this that I want to touch on just briefly is about the retention side. That, of course, the better we are at retaining our staff members who are already here, the less we have to rely on going out and finding new people. And to this point, I would just highlight we are trying in ways that we can to really wrap our arms around our staff members who are here during what is in our world an uncertain and often difficult time. And as members of our city schools family, we care about your well-being, and we care about the ways that you are needing to adapt and adjust and be flexible. And to that point, I just want to highlight that last year we launched a Be Well initiative, a staff wellness initiative, and we are continuing to make offerings available to staff through that. And next week we will share a bit more information about a variety of ways that we want to connect with you. So webinars, courses, other virtual activities about your personal wellness, about how you are able to navigate your relationships and your work during this time, and also for supervisors, how you are supports that you can have to manage your staff and manage teams. So I also hope that is something that lots of staff members will access to see what resources are available, so that we can also maintain the great team that we have in place right now, even during difficult times. And I'm going to give a little plug for one other thing to say. Some staff members across city schools have asked about pictures and messages they saw about many of our teachers receiving special shirt deliveries last week. And others are saying, what about me? When will mine come? And I'll say that we wanted to launch during Teacher Appreciation Week some targeted drops of something that we actually have for all of our teachers. And we will be reaching out to gather more information about shirt sizes, so everyone will have one of our Be Well City Schools polo shirts very soon.
I think that's great news, Jeremy. Lots of folks will be interested to hear that. The last question I'm going to do, and then I'm going to let Dr. S give the last final remarks, and then Jeremy, you can close us out, is for Chief Perkins-Cohen. Allison, the question is, we want an update on the Kerwin funding. They saw a news article that said it was approved, but as part of legislation was passed by the state legislature, but then we had a veto and no dollar amount was cited. Can you give any clarity to the group about the Kerwin funding at this time?
Sure. Yeah, so it's a really important question right now. It's been on a lot of our minds. First, I want to start by thanking everybody on this call, because the fact that the Kerwin bill passed and the Built to Learn Act passed is a result of a lot of work of people advocating, of people writing letters, of people going to Annapolis, and that is a lot of the folks who are on this call who made that happen. I also want to give a particular shout out to our legislative staff, Melissa Broom and Dewana Starrett, who both are folks that maybe people on the call don't really know or see too much, but they're constantly working behind the scenes to get things done for city school students. And we got a lot of changes put in place to both those pieces of legislation that really made them better for Baltimore City students. And so that's kind of behind the scenes work that people don't see, but I don't think there's any other entities who got more changes in the legislation than we did. Sorry, there's a plane flying overhead. So the other thing, so in terms of the future of Kerwin, so it was of course disappointing to have the governor veto the bill. I think a lot of the work that we've done over the last few years to develop relationships with our legislators have really paid off, both in terms of the changes we got to the legislation, as well as to the fact that we're in close contact with them now as we move forward. And Dr. Santelises and I meet with the leadership of the city delegation on a weekly basis to check in with them and talk to them this week about the future. And I think, both those bills, so the Kerwin bill passed both houses. and the Build to Learn Act passed both houses with veto-proof majorities. The reason I keep mentioning the two bills is that they are linked. The governor vetoed the Kerwin legislation, but the Build to Learn Act does not go into place unless the Kerwin bill is put in place. And so he didn't directly veto the Build to Learn Act, but the Build to Learn Act will not become law unless the Kerwin bill passes. So there has to be an override of the Kerwin legislation in order for Build to Learn Act to be put in place. That's the bill that would allow us to continue our 21st century buildings program and to implement our high school plan. And I think we are optimistic. Our legislators that we talked to, they're very optimistic about an override. The Speaker of the House wrote a letter recently being very supportive of educational funding and making very clear that this of all times would be the time that we need to invest in educational resources. And our delegation and the Senate President are hopeful as well. So a lot could change between now and the legislative session. There will be no special session as far as we know, so it would be not until January till we really know. But I think we're very cautiously optimistic about that. And in general, we are also making use of all the resources that are available to us. There will be difficult financial challenges ahead. I mean, Kerwin will not be implemented in FY22 right away. I expect there will be a lag. There is an economic trigger, even if the bill is overridden through a veto override. There is a economic trigger that slows the implementation of it. So I don't expect it to be implemented in FY22. I expect our delegation will do everything they can to help us in the FY22 legislative session, but what that looks like, I don't know yet. So we are now spending a lot of time really looking at our existing expenses to figure out where we can reduce costs, looking at things like the CARES Act and the FEMA funds to try to strategically use the resources that are available to us and spend responsibly and make cuts where we can so that we can have the resources we need to provide stability and also try to address the recovery that we all know needs to happen for our students.
Thank you, Chief Perkins-Cohen. Dr. Santelizis, would you like to give the last few remarks before Jeremy closes us out today?
Sure. My last few remarks really just continue what I was saying before, and that is couldn't be prouder of the city schools team. The way that people have worked, have gone above and beyond, have kept a focus on families, a focus on wellness and relationships, has paid off. I couldn't be prouder. And I really do believe that we are in a good position to weather anything that comes next. And just a big thank you and continue to take care of yourselves. I think anybody who was tuned in last night knows that we will be off district-wide on Election Day. So take that time to do whatever feeds you as an individual so that we are ready to ramp up and continue to do great work. But again, I couldn't be prouder. The whole city schools team has just done a fantastic job. And I can't think, frankly, of a more appropriate time to have our first district-wide staff meeting, virtual though it might be. And I want to give a shout out to Tina Highcupboard and Jeremy Grant Skinner just for their continued leadership in really seeing the need to have this kind of communication and connection. So shout out to them and their teams and everybody who's made it possible. So back to you, Jeremy.
Thanks very much. After that, all I have to add today for everyone is a final request. We will, I believe, post in the chat and then also follow up with a message asking you all to please give us feedback on today's session. I mentioned at the beginning, and Dr. Santelizis mentioned this is a first of its kind event district-wide, and we definitely would like to hear your feedback about how it went. And to that point, I will say thank you to the more than 8,000 staff members who responded to survey questions through our declaration of intent this year that our team is actively analyzing right now so that we can share back with you what we are learning from everything you told us about your employee experience. We will be sharing that at the end of the school year in June once that analysis is done. And I share that today just so you know that when you give us feedback, we are taking that feedback and figuring out how we can use it to make things better and be responsive. And I hope that you'll do the same today by letting us know how this went. And please continue to stay safe, stay home when you can, practice social distancing, wear those masks, and we will look forward to seeing everyone again virtually and then eventually again in person very soon. Have a great day.